The story of Elden Ring expands far beyond the saga of the Tarnished that we as the player get to experience in-game, as it is but the final act of a forgotten conflict that has shaped the history of the lands between. And at the center of that history lies one key orchestrator, Queen Marika, the Eternal. To understand the story of the lands between means to understand the intent of the one who is its author. Yet how much do we really comprehend of Marika's will? As the vessel of the Elden Ring, Marika is revered as the sole deity within the Golden Order, but in an act steeped in mystery, she shattered the relic, which ignited a catastrophic war and resulted in her confinement within the Erdtree, which culminated in her demise at the hand of the Tarnished, who would become Elden Lord. The question as to why Marika would do such a thing is the impetus to the quest of understanding her character. Some see it as a rebellious act against those who would control her, while others depict her as a torn soul aiming to end the order she initiated, fueled by remorse over its consequences. But I believe that her true motives run much deeper than that. And the answer to this question that I will share with you today will serve as the cornerstone of my interpretation of the hidden story of Elden Ring, what I like to call the Emancipation Theory. And I guess this is a good time for me to address something. Some of the most direct and commonly asked questions in regard to the lore of Elden Ring are often unanswerable. We, as the player, lack enough information to conclude with certainty many things. In fact, most of the crucial elements that would allow us to paint the full picture are subject to that uncertainty. This is what makes From Software's style of world building so engaging for many of us, but is also the source of much frustration. If we are to ever attempt to move forward towards the greater narrative of the game, we have to accept that some assumptions have to be made. Though we could endlessly list all the various theories and interpretations that surround a certain topic or character, eventually we must take our pick of what makes sense for us, lest we endlessly stick to reading the same item descriptions going nowhere. These channels and my videos are building towards a single grand theory, and as such, this video will be built upon some of my previous works, and taking them for granted. What I try to do is share with you all my perspective and opinion on what I think is the story underneath it all. The goal isn't necessarily to try to infallibly prove why such and such is the right answer, as that would be a false errand, but rather lay out all the reasons why I personally think this is the story being told. And I know full well how some of you feel about some of my theories, as they are more on the quote-unquote unique side, to put it nicely. But even still, I do hope you can find value in this scenario I am trying to paint as we move forward. And with that being said, enjoy! The Golden Order forms the bulk of the history of the lands between as we know it. As the order envisioned by Queen Marika the Eternal, it was created when the Rune of Death was removed from the Elden Ring and sealed away by Marika's shadowbound beast, Malekith, an order of life that would produce the Erdtree. To try to understand Marika's motives, we need to look at the bigger picture. So first, let's start by painting a rough timeline of Marika's reign. Its history began with the war against the Giants, where Marika's army, led by her consort Godfrey, slaughtered the worshippers of the fell god and confined his flame of ruin atop the mountain. Death had already been sealed, and now with the flame of ruin gone, Marika seemingly ensured that nothing could harm the Erdtree, and then sent Godfrey on a long war to claim the continent. It is also during that period that Radagon made his first appearance in the Liurnian Wars, where he gained renown as a champion and oddly came to marry the enemy's leader, Lunar Queen Renala, ending the war and uniting the houses of the Erdtree and the Moon. This union, while strategically beneficial, also resulted in the birth of the first Empyrean of the Golden Order, the Lunar Princess Ranni. And soon Elden Lord Godfrey subjugated all of the lands, his campaign ending interestingly at the border between Limgrave and Caelid. And after all his enemies were felled, his grace dimmed and he was expelled from the lands between, as Marika calls upon Radagon to be her new consort. The age of Elden Lord Radagon was one marked with many changes to the norms of society, but had also seen the Golden Order enter its golden age, a time that would abruptly come to an end with the first death of a demigod in recorded history. The Night of the Black Knives shook the Empire to its core, as shrouded assassins swept through the lands between, bringing death to the demigods, Marika's children. And finally, after that came the Shattering, where Marika herself shattered the Elden Ring, the trigger for the war that would ensue, where the remaining living demigods fought to claim each other's shard of the Elden Ring. But ultimately they would fail, and leave the lands between ruined and locked in a long stalemate to this day. So, the two fingers, arbiters of the greater will's favors, elect to call upon the Tarnished, the graceless warriors that were once banished with Lord Godfrey. They would extend them grace, and one of them would become Elden Lord. But in order to do so, they would have to burn the Earth Tree itself and free both fire and death, completely destroying the Golden Order. These are in broad strokes the events that lead all the way to the game's endings from the very birth of the Earth Tree. The reason I am laying it all out like this is that it serves to highlight our first and most obvious tell of Marika undermining her own order. The return of the Tarnished after the shattering of the Elden Ring serves as the final nail in the Golden Order's coffin, yet their banishment and subsequent callback was promised by Marika long before any of that would come to pass. And so we can already tell that her reasons for shattering the Elden Ring could not have been on a whim. No, as it is deeply linked to circumstances she herself planned eons before. And as we will see, Marika's involvement in bringing about the events of the game are even more insidious than it initially seemed. And to show that, there is no better place to start than here.
Very well. In Marika's own words, my lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die. Then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
The Elden Lord armor tells us that when Godfrey's conquest was finished and his last worthy foe was defeated, grace simply faded from his eyes. Him and his warriors, now tarnished, were chased from the lands between. But thanks to the echo of Marika, we know that this awfully convenient coincidence was in fact no coincidence at all, but rather it was Marika's doing. Marika took away their grace, yet for some reason promised them to return it and call them back to their home. In an earlier version of the game, the Tarnished would have gotten a chance to talk directly with Godfrey, which gives us more information around what took place.
Brave Tarnished, mighty warriors who fought at my side, await the summons. It will call to thee one day. Heed the fading grace. Listen to the fingers. Gold commandeth the very stars, giving life its fullest brilliance. Elden Ring, oh Elden Ring. Be ready once it is shattered.
There is a few noteworthy things about this dialogue, but for now what it does is it explicitly confirms to us that Marika intended to shatter the Elden Ring as early as the age of Godfrey. And the reason couldn't simply have been a change of heart or remorse over the multiple genocide her order was responsible of, since the timing of Godfrey's exile betrays anything but a calculated decision. She first wanted the lands between conquered, and then when she had no more use for him, she sent him away in preparation for events to come. This narrative also serves to raise an essential question. At what point did Marika decide to shatter the Elden Ring? Something that we will have to keep in mind moving forward. So then, what could be the reason that could have made Marika want to betray the Greater Will during that period? Well, the most common motive given by the community for Marika banishing Godfrey was that she came to a realization around this time, and that revelation was what started a change in her that led her to plotting to take down her own order. This event could be summed up as a crisis of fate that swept not only Marika but her subjects too. Though we do not have a definitive timeline of when that happened, we can vaguely link it to the end of the Age of Abundance, which is closely associated with Godfrey's time. The earlier periods of the Golden Order were blessed by the bounty of the Earth Tree. Its sap was collected and was considered the greatest of jewels. But at some point, that fleeting age ended. This change could have heavily harmed the people's faith in Marika, and might have been the cause of great unrest. It is possible that it is also during this period that the Earth Tree seed first appeared. If the existence of the minor Earth Tree Church, as well as the echo of Marika we can hear within it, is linked in any shape or form to those times. The realization that not just the bounty of the Erdtree but the Erdtree itself were not eternal was perhaps ample reason for not just the people, but also Marika herself to be shaken. And so the idea would be that in her despair, at the realization that her age would not be eternal, Marika decided to rebel and take the whole of it down with her. However you feel about this explanation, it paints Marika as an incredibly childish character who threw a tantrum of cataclysmic scale. Upon finding out that her order was not eternal, she decided to plan eons in advance its elaborate downfall, at the cost of the land, her children's life, and her own. For make no mistake, Marika's actions to shatter the ring come at her own detriment. As the vessel, Marika would shatter with the Elden Ring, a fact she was fully aware of, and the ultimate goal of the Round Table Hold and the Tarnished, as per her own instructions, is the murder of a god, herself.
Are you having second thoughts? Might I have a word, then? Your kind are meant to challenge them, to slay them. Now wield it, and kill them. Their demigods and their god. Queen Marika herself wishes it so.
Hugh was always saying that you were a lord to him. So slay her with the weapons he smithed. Slay the god Marika, who cursed us all.
The brightest days of the Golden Order were yet still ahead, and she had just united the lands between, fully establishing her rule. This is the equivalent of building a new house, and just as work on it is done, you realize that it will fall apart in the next 50 years. And so you take it upon yourself to plan decades in advance to burn it down and everyone inside. As flawed as a character Marika may have been, this course of action just doesn't add up if those are her motivations. Even more than that, I don't believe that the end of the Age of Abundance led to Godfrey's banishment, nor do I think Marika was upset about it. Instead, I want to suggest that both Godfrey's exile and the end of the Erdtree's bounty happened for the same underlying reasons, with the former potentially happening first. Let me explain. You see, the Erdtree was born and grew from the red primal matter of the Crucible. The Crucible once contained the origin of all life blended together within it, and the Erdtree feeds on the corpses of those who would latch onto its roots as part of the traditional burying rite of the Golden Order. Miquella also later tried to recreate an Erdtree by watering one of its seeds with his own blood. All of this to say that the Erdtree and its offsprings feed on concentrated life energy, in this case, people or blood. Then, Godfrey's campaign throughout the lands between and the countless death it's created must have watered the land and fed the Erdtree, allowing it to grow to its full glory. And it was the abundance of corpses that was behind its abundance of blessings. This mechanism was reflected in the very culture of the Golden Order, particularly during Godfrey's age. Even putting aside the obvious act of Erdtree burial, the arenas which were built all around the lands between were sites where bloody ritual combat to the death was conducted in honor of the Erdtree, another practice that also later died in the Age of Radagon. And so it wasn't a coincidence that the bounty of the Erdtree was only associated with Godfrey's age, but rather it was that age of bloodshed that was behind it in the first place. And to further add on to what I said earlier, I would like to address the main reason behind the idea that Marika despaired around this period of time, that being the echo found in the minor Erdtree church.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
Marika never in any situation has addressed anyone with anything but absolute authority, be it Godfrey, Radagon, or her children the demigods. She naturally stands above all of them. Her power was never hinging on the faith or acceptance of her subjects. Yet somehow in this echo, she is addressing her audience as comrades and is arguing, trying to convince them that things will be fine, trying to sell them on this new path ahead, trying to quell their unrest. I believe this is not Marika talking. Let's take a moment to look a bit closer at this echo. What Marika talks about in her speech could only be described as the impetus, the rationale behind Golden Order fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is a religious movement that appeared at some point during the Golden Order. It aims to study and understand order in its most pure form. It is said to be scholarship in all but name, and for good reason. The study of order is more akin to scientific research in our world than religion. And fundamentalism seems to be taking inspiration from the real-world scientific fervor of the Islamic Golden Age, where the principles of ijtihad championed independent reasoning and critical analysis. This period was marked by a profound commitment to scientific exploration. The pursuit of knowledge was deemed a religious duty, inspired by the Islamic belief that understanding the natural world was a means of gaining a deeper appreciation for God's creation. This is why Golden Order fundamentalism focuses on mathematics and physics, as they are means by which one can model and understand the universe. This scientific dimension also explains why their incantations are based on intelligence as much as fate. The existence of fundamentalism and its nature also serve to inform us on where Elden Ring takes its inspiration for the concepts of chaos and order, and that is a topic I am very excited to explore in a future video. In a way, what it does is bridge the gap between sorceries and incantations, and so to be a fundamentalist, one would require both the academic rigor and drive to unearth the secrets of nature, as well as being a greatly devout and godly person. Enters Radagon, the second Elden Lord, a character who in his quest for self-fulfillment, for completion, sought to study and understand many things. As the husband of the Lunar Queen, he studied sorceries, and as the husband of Marika, he studied incantations. From Radagon's Ring of Light, we know that he was a fundamentalist. But more so than that, it is abundantly clear that there is no better candidate to be the founder of the movement than him. As seen from the Echo of Marika, fundamentalism's impetus started around the time where the people of the Golden Order faced a crisis of fate, which happened due to the end of the Age of Plenty associated with Godfrey. Radagon, as the new Elden Lord, brought into the Golden Order the sorceries and culture of Caria, and into the Fate he brought the methods he used during his studies of the stars. And so Golden Order fundamentalism was born, marking both a change in the faith and the norm of the age. The minor earthly church is deeply linked to that transition, and it is also there that we find the seal that enhances Golden Order fundamentalist incantations. Marika, on the other hand, is never associated with fundamentalism. The person who was pleading to the people and preaching what is essentially fundamentalism is not Marika, it is Radagon. And it is when we consider that for a moment that the tone of the speaker starts to make a lot more sense. Radagon was at one point a common soldier of the Golden Order, who through his achievements in war, rose to the rank of champion and finally Elden Lord. Radagon would address his contemporaries in the manner seen in this dialogue. This piece of dialogue is pivotal to understanding Marika's character, and me taking it away from her has a significant impact on how her motivations can be interpreted. The reason I am saying all of that is that I want you to understand that I am not doing it lightly. The game through Melina explicitly spells out that this is an echo of Marika, and I do not make a habit of randomly discrediting or dismissing what the game or a character is telling us. Though many will vehemently disagree with this take, and that's understandable, in this case specifically I believe there is room for an argument to be made. Based on what we as the player know, the notion that this dialogue is actually from Radagon is not inconceivable, as the game also explicitly tells us that Radagon is Marika. And what is conceivable becomes likely to me when considering the context in which the echo lies, its contents, and how it fits into the bigger narrative of Marika's actions and her motivations. And so to summarize, not only can Marika's course of action not be justified by a crisis of fate, the main clue of such an event might be a massive misdirection and not her words at all. And the presumed trigger, the end of the Age of Abundance, likely took place during a transitional period following Godfrey's banishment, in a time where Radagon was just beginning his reign as Elden Lord. And so by saying that, we are back to square one. Which means, to better understand Marika's intentions, we must turn our attention to what may be the most pivotal event in the history of the Golden Order.
The misshapen corpse under Stormvale. That is a sacred relic of the Black Knives plot, as that famed night of assassination is known. It happened during the golden age of the Erd Tree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade, and on a bitter night murdered Godwyn the Golden. That was the first recorded death of a demigod in all history. You recall our conversation about the Night of the Black Knives, yes? They say the assassins who carried out the deed were scions of the Eternal City, a group entirely of women arrayed in armor of silver under cloaks which fooled the eye. The knives they wielded, though, were imparted with the power of the Rune of Death through sinister rite.
So even if we were to concede that Marika's actions weren't due to a change of heart that happened sometimes after the early days of her reign, it could be said that her preparation for the returns of the Tarnished and the shattering of the Elden Ring could have been some sort of insurance or backup plan, a sort of big red button to press if she ever felt like it. And so the trigger in this situation would have been the assassination of her children during the Night of the Black Knives, as it is called, the event that took the beloved Godwyn the Golden from the lands between. Even in universe, there is a notion that it is the Night of Knife that drove Marika to the brink. It is important to remember though that very few people are actually aware that Marika shattered the Elden Ring. Specifically, only the Fingers and those who received their guidance like Gideon and other Tarnished who have procured a great rune, and probably the demigods. It seems the masses think that Marika has simply abandoned them. So the general perception is that the Night of Knives, the smashing of the Elden Ring, and the Shattering War were all part of the same cascade of events. But the notion that Marika shattered the ring due to her children's death is actually the players putting two and two together. But as we will see, looking at everything we know and the relationships of the different people involved, it is in fact more likely that Marika had a direct hand in orchestrating that event. Ranni the Witch, daughter of Radagon and Rennala, was the individual behind the forging of the God-slain Black Knives. After stealing a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, she enacted a specific ritual which resulted in the simultaneous death of Godwyn's soul and her Empyrean flesh. The Black Knife assassins, her accomplices, rode through the lands between that night and killed multiple of Marika's children. And those same assassins are also said to be Numen women from the Eternal Cities, and they constitute our first and most obvious link to Marika. As Numen, they are of the same race as her, and their armor even says that they share close ties. The nature of their relationship is never elaborated on, though it could be tempting to jump on this link to incriminate Marika's involvement in that plot. This piece of information does not tell us either ways if they were working for Marika or were opposed to her and enacting some sort of vengeance. Though, it might be worth pointing out that Melina, Marika's daughter, actually shares the assassin's fighting style. What you might deduce from that is up to how meaningful you think that actually is. What actually matters here is Melina herself, who is one of the few confirmed direct accomplices of Marika's design. She is the Kindling Maiden and serves as a guide to aid the Tarnished in his mission of becoming Elden Lord. Melina's role was directly given to her by her mother, and that role includes burning the Erdtree Thorn and entrusting the player with certain keepsakes, notably Torrent, the Spirit Steed, and the Crimson and Cerulean Flasks. Where this comes full circle is that when entrusted with Torrent, the player will be confronted by none other than Ranni, the main culprit behind the Night of Knives. Ranni says that she has been tasked with delivering you something at the request of Torrent's former master. This is vital as the delivery of certain items to a chosen Tarnished is a known part of Marika's plot, something that she directly instructed her daughter to do. Ranni, by aiding in that process and wishing us good luck in our quest, shows herself to be directly in the know of Marika's plan. And by the way, should you miss the meeting with Ranni, the items will find their way directly to the Round Table Hold. This, in combination with the close ties the Black Knife assassins have with Marika, makes her connection to the Night of Knives significantly more likely. But that would mean that Marika wanted her children killed then. And the answer is yes. For make no mistake, the God of the Golden Order has no qualm sacrificing her own children for her goals. And the first instance of that is simply Melina, which serves as nothing more than kindling in her mother's design. And even when considering the soulless demigods themselves, there is only one instance in-game which gives us any sort of hint as to how Marika sees them or feels about them. The ghost of the Mausoleum Church of the Weeping Peninsula laments the state of the soulless demigods, describing them as the Queen's unwanted children. This cold detachment between the demigods and their god is also most notably visible in an echo of Marika where she addresses them directly.
Hear me, demigods. My children, beloved, make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, albeit a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.
If you ever had any doubts that Marika would be willing to sacrifice her beloved children, then this would make it clear how far she would go. This echo is particularly interesting as it shows the truth behind the Shattering War. The demigods were in a way accused of being corrupted by the strength of the Great Runes, and driven by ambition, they warred. Though this could still be true for some of them, for example Godfrey, the reality of the situation is that they were given no choice by Marika. They would either slaughter each other or die at the hand of the Common Tarnished. And if you still feel that they somehow had any sort of agency over the outcome of the situation they were put in, then hold on that thought for a bit longer, until we expose the full dreadful truth of Marika's control in the last part of this video. And this manipulation wasn't just reserved to the demigods either, as it extended also to her own shadowbound beast. As an Empyrean, Marika was given Malikat as a loyal servant, but also as an insurance for the Fingers, as Malikat would turn into a baleful shadow to kill her had she gone astray. However, Marika's only use she had of Malikat was as a guardian of destined death, sealed very far away from her and her order. But even then, she betrayed him.
Marika, why wouldst thou gull me? Why? Shit.
Malikat believes that Marika fooled him, yet the only thing she had him do dates back to the very creation of the Golden Order. If that act by itself constitutes a betrayal, then it means it was done with ill intent, that being the taking of the Finger's insurance out of the picture. And so it seems that even then, from the very beginning, Marika's actions show that she always intended to betray the Greater Will and his emissaries. Now, this is a lot to take in and consider, and perhaps even if you had indulged me so far, all I have been doing is taking away potential reasons for Marika to want to shatter the Elden Ring. So the question still stands then, why? And I promise I will get to that in just a moment. But the reason I have been so insistent on the question of when did Marika decide to do it is that the answer to that serves as our biggest lead on understanding Marika's motivation. The understanding that Marika's actions were not in fact reactionary and not a consequence of something that happened during the Golden Order is the point that I'm trying to drive home. And from there, we don't have to look very far to understand the why. Ranni, as well as the Black Knife Assassins, are what informs us on Marika's true alignment. You see, Ranni's end goal is to bring about the Age of the Stars, where she takes the Elden Ring, Order itself, and embarks on a grand journey throughout the Dark Cosmos, as to take its influence away. This also happens to be the goal of the Nox and the Eternal Cities, from which the Black Knife Assassins hail. The Nox are said to be an ancient race who were once punished by the Greater Will for opposing it, and were consequently buried underground. Ever since, they have been plotting, wishing, and preparing for what they call the Age of the Stars. From the Black Knife Assassins, we know that the Nox are related to the ancient Numens, the same race as Marika. And as it turns out, Marika the Eternal's connection to the Eternal series goes a lot deeper than just her title. In fact, she could potentially be its founder. If you have watched my video on Radagon being a mimic of Marika, you would know that one of the pillars of that theory is that Marika hails from the Eternal City, the same civilization that tried to create a lore through mimicry. Back then, the main connection I was aware that led credence to that idea were the Black Knife Assassins, as well as the internal names for the Eternal City enemies. But since then, a few more things came to my attention. Even though the Nox enemies were named Marika lineage in the files, the item description of the Nox sorceress and priestess Ash in the 1.0 version of the game clarifies their genealogical link much more explicitly. The Nox are said to be the descendants of Marika, to which they owe their title of Empyrean's family, found in the 1.0 Nox armor set. This is where I would like to remind you of what the potential link of the Black Knife Assassins to Marika might be, and the fact that Melina, Marika's daughter, shares their distinct fighting styles. But perhaps the most exciting discovery made on the subject comes from YouTuber and data miner Sekirotubi, who in a Twitter post enabled internal flags the developer over at From Software used while working on the game areas. These flags are obviously not meant to be seen by the player, and what they give away is the labels by which the devs internally refer to the Eternal Cities, calling them Marika Ruins. This insight into Marika's potential origins also begs the question of how old is she really, and what if the Eternal Cities were explicitly named after her? But I will leave those questions for another time. Even though cut content spells it out for us, there is still ways to infer the Marika Eternal City connection from what we have in-game, though it takes a lot more speculation. Black Knife assassins aside, for example, you will notice that the Vulcan mausoleums that cradle Marika's dead offspring, the soulless demigods, are actually Eternal City structures, which is fairly significant as one's burial rite usually speaks volumes about their heritage, even if it wasn't clearly apparent in life. Then there is a lot of small details like the Earth Tree's culture taking a lot from the alchemical practices of the Eternal Cities, with chemists being priests of the Earth Tree, as well as perfuming being as common of a practice as it is. Even the architecture of Leyndell takes some distinct patterns from the Eternal Cities, while Lower Leyndell is completely in the same architectural style as Ordina and Celia, which are basically the closest things to surface settlements for the Nox. Have you ever wondered why Godfrey's conquest of the lands between stopped at the border between Caelid and Limgrave? It's an odd stopping point for a war that did not leave an inch of the lands unturned. Caelid is a region controlled by Celia, the town of sorcery, where Radagon would later learn gravitational magic. It has also clear ties to the Eternal Cities and even Sage Gowry, referring to them as descendants of the Eternal.
You've been a saint through and through. As thanks, I vow to impart to you my knowledge of the lost sorceries of the Celians, descendants of the Eternal.
I don't see any reason why the Golden Order's conquest would ever stop at the last region left to grab, unless said region was already considered annexed territory, and Celia is unquestionably part of the Golden Order today. And so perhaps this is the most important point I would like to communicate with this video. Something as major as the current god and vessel of the Elden Ring being also of the Eternal Cities, which are directly and openly opposed to the Fingers and the Greater Will, is not something that can just be ignored. In order to even start discussing what Marika's character is like and what her motivation are, you need to acknowledge and take into account her origins, which is perhaps one of the most commonly overlooked aspects of any analysis of her I have ever seen, particularly in this case where said origins come with such a heavy baggage. The notion that Marika could be working to destroy her own order from the inside since the very beginning only seems so outlandish when you don't account for who she was before being a god. And even though it would seem nonsensical that she would start an order just to destroy it, the answer is that Marika's plot and actions result in an outcome that has a much broader and meaningful impact than just the fall of the Golden Order, which we'll be exploring later in the final video of this emancipation theory. I am sorry for leaving something for another time again, but the truth is that I need to set all these building blocks in order to convey the bigger picture, and I will still need to talk about these subjects on screen before all the pieces are in place, so please bear with me. But for now, we have to ask, why would the Fingers elect an Empyrean from the race that challenged the Greater Will, has been punished for it, and is still being punished for it to this day? It would be common sense not to give power and support to an individual that has plenty of reasons to resent you and has turned against you once already. And although we can conjecture a few reasons as to why the Fingers would still choose Marika, the game already seems to have a neat little answer to that question already. As it so happens, the Eternals are in possession of a secret rite, which requires a treasured and rare substance to conduct. The effect of this rite is the total and complete undoing of all antagonizations. Well, isn't that awfully convenient? Through the power of fate, Celestial Dew, treasure of the Eternal City, allows one to conduct the rite of absolution in a fountain in front of the Nox priestess. And so, even if Marika has always harbored animosity towards the Greater Will, as long as she treads carefully and keeps her true intentions hidden, she would be able to carry out her scheme until the course of events to come could not be altered. Which brings us to the final subject I would like to talk about today: fate. Throughout the video, the world has reared its head a few times, but I cannot stress enough how important this notion is. You see, there is an aspect of the world building of this setting that is only ever mentioned twice as far as I know. And one such occasion was the original reveal trailer of Elden Ring, dating back to even before the age of Halloween in 2019.
That which commanded the stars, giving life its fullest brilliance. The Elden Ring. Oh, Elden Ring.
The Elden Ring, that which commanded the stars. In this world, astrology is very much real, and the fate that govern the existence of beings seems to be quite literally written in the night sky. To control the stars means to control fate, and that is the fearsome power of the Elden Ring itself. It is fate that sits at the center of this ancient conflict between the Nox and the Greater Will. You see, Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring and as such hold its power she is free to use as the sole god of her own order. And so her scheming becomes a lot more sinister when you consider she has some level of control over the very fate of the people itself. And we actually know for a fact that the events orchestrated by Marika were actually also written in the tapestry of fate. During the Golden Order, it is said that carrying astrology fettered at the vines, and reading fate in the stars was not possible. However, there is another way people can peer into destiny, and that is through their faith. Those are known as prophecies, and they show the fatality of the curse Marika placed on the land. It is said that sometimes priests of the Golden Order would glimpse the prophecy of cardinal sin in their faith, showing them the burning of the earth tree which would come when the Tarnished would become Elden Lord. And it does not stop there. As it happens, we have multiple instances of visions that all show different parts of the same scenario that is to be played out.
Do you know of the noble Gold Mask? Though he was but a Tarnished, living outside the lands between, he was a great scholar who foresaw the coming guidance of grace. And now, I hear he has come to the lands between alone to contemplate the Golden Order.
Goldmask, an eminent Golden Order fundamentalist and scholar, through his research into Order, managed to predict the return of the Tarnished and the Call of Grace long before it happened. Not only a testament of his genius and insight, but also a demonstration of the inevitability of events to come.
The one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. Goodbye.
The fingers I served once prophesied a Tarnished would one day become Elden Lord and restore the Golden Order.
The Prophecy of Flame, as it is called, also directly ties the burning of the Earth Tree to the subsequent freeing of destined death. And finally, even the two fingers foresaw the ultimate crowning of a Tarnished as Elden Lord. The Call of Grace, the burning of the Earth Tree, the unsealing of destined death, and the ascension of a Tarnished to the throne of Elden Lord. All unthinkable events that form every beat of the scenario played out in-game, were all foretold by vastly different people from different times. This scheme was directly engraved into fate itself. It isn't to say that every detail is set in stone or that there is no escape, since clearly the Lord of Frenzied Flame exists. But then again, if anything would shatter the influence of the Elden Ring, it would be chaos itself, its anathema. But besides that, every ending regardless of the variation plays out exactly as Marika wanted. And the realization that she had a hand directly meddling in fate makes the shattering war all the more sinister. She forced her children against one another, which resulted in the stalemate that allowed the Tarnished to pick off the demigods one by one in a land between weakened and ravaged by war. So was it even possible for things to have gone differently at all then? After all, the return of the Tarnished was hinging on the shattering war coming to a stalemate. It seems to me that they were set up to fail. Now, there is a lot more to say about fate specifically and why it is the center of the conflict and the various things and forces that have sway over it, but you guessed it, it's gonna be for another video. So for now, this is everything I have to say in relation to Marika specifically. And in short, here is my proposition. Marika was never loyal to the Greater Will and the Two Fingers. She carries with her the dreams of an ancient civilization who were once crushed for opposing their control. And when she was chosen to be the god of the New Age, the vessel of the Elden Ring and holder of its power, she started enacting her plan, making preparations throughout the history of her age, all in anticipation for the day she would shatter the Elden Ring, initiating the cascade of events that would lead to their ultimate goal, with the whole of the lands between, her children, and the Tarnished cursed to play their fated role on the board. thank you everyone for watching. The next video is going to be about the Eternal Cities, their ties to the ancient dynasty, and how they were destroyed by the Greater Will. I hope you look forward to it. I am sure many of you have plenty of questions and they will be answered in time. Until then, I want to hear what you all think, so do not hesitate to leave a comment as I do try to read them all. If you want to support my channel, be sure to like and subscribe, and share the video with anyone interested in Elden Ring lore. We are so incredibly close to the Shadow of the Erdtree trailer at the Game Awards, so keep an eye out for a deep dive on that too. And with all that being said, goodbye.